a lot of people have asked me, and I'm sure you've gotten this question as well, is like, isn't that boring? Going for swimming for 3, 4, 5, 6, more than that, 10 hours, isn't
Yeah.
that like, this is the most boring thing ever? And objectively, I guess you sort of have to agree. You're just going for hours and hours and hours, just swinging your arms, and you can't talk to people. And that's, one of the things I love about it is, like I mentioned, I have an extroverted side, but marathon swimming, even more so than running and cycling, allows you to really explore being an introvert. Because even if you're with other people, you can't talk to them unless you stop.
Right.
And there's some magic in that. I love it.
Hello, and welcome to Marathon Swim Stories, where we explore the human side of the superhuman feats of endurance swimmers and those who support them. I'm marathon swimmer and coach Shannon Keegan. Do you enjoy Marathon Swim Stories? Tell a friend about it, or leave a review with your podcast provider. Want to give some feedback? I'd love to hear from you. Shannon@intrepidwater.com. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hey, Rob, it's great to talk to you on the other side of the world, quite literally. Thank you for being my guest today on Marathon Swim Stories. I'm in a new location. I'm in my garage. I hope it's not too echoey.
Sounds fine to me. Down here in New Zealand, I can't hear the echo.
Awesome. Okay, well, tell us, Rob, what's your story?
Well, basically, you may have already picked up already. I'm not from New Zealand. I'm not going to convince anyone I wasn't born here. I'm from a little town called Corner Brook, Newfoundland in Canada. I've lived a reasonably nomadic life. I've lived in a total of 5 countries now and visited many others. I started swimming when I was not quite 13 years old. And the swimming was born basically out of being an absolutely terrible athlete. I was always a really active little kid, like skiing, riding BMX bikes, splashing about in the water. But in Canada and the United States is similar. The main sports that people do are like baseball, basketball, and a few other things like that. I have never been able to aim at a target and hit it. If I'm throwing a ball, can't catch, can't throw. So basically I was a bench warmer of the grade 7 basketball team and got pretty frustrated with that. And then I basically, for about a year, the year I was through almost all the way through my grade 8 year, I think I was 13 in grade 8, if I'm not mistaken. I was not active at all. I got really frustrated by, I was basically kind of humiliated by my grade 7 basketball coach. And I sat around, it was very out of character. I sat around eating a lot of junk food, watching a lot of TV. Back in the day, some friends of mine, we played this, role-playing game called Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
That game has evolved to the internet now. I mean, back then it was just paper and imagination. I don't know what it involves now.
Right.
But basically, one morning, I think it was April, the year I was in grade 8, which would have been 1989. I was getting out of the shower for getting ready to go to school, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I just realized, oh my God, I'm turning into my father. Like I hadn't been active, eating a lot of junk food. My father, 3 years earlier, I think it was, he'd had his heart attack in his 40s.
Oh my goodness.
And
wow.
So he survived it, and life went on. But it was just this moment of looking at myself in the shower, and I went, oh my God, I'm turning into dad.
Wow.
And I went downstairs for breakfast and I said, Mom, I want to join the swim team. Because
Really?
I just had this moment where I just remembered that I really love swimming.
Okay.
And
So you'd learned, you had
like
lessons and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I could swim, but I mean, I was very uncoordinated, couldn't do freestyle that well, couldn't get the length of the pool without pausing for breath. But I love being in the water, and I also love being on my BMX bike and just running around in the bush for no reason. So I said to Mom, yeah, I want to join the swim team. And by the time I got home from school, she registered me on the swim team and went on that afternoon. So, I mean, that's basically how I started swimming.
Wow.
And Yeah, and it was good. I can't remember exactly. I'm going to guess somewhere between 3 and 4 months, where I went from, okay, I'm in the water flailing about like an idiot because my coordination is, my natural coordination is not awesome. So it took a lot of work, but 3, 4 months in, I was allowed to, I could allow myself to swim for the whole hour and a half, 2 hour swim practice without, feeling like I was hit by a truck. And what really drew me to swimming, other than just loving the water, was that unlike basketball, which I'd failed miserably at, I was allowed to race even though I wasn't good.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so initially, that was what really, my coach didn't seem to care that I wasn't that good. She recognized I was working hard, and so that's basically how I became a swimmer.
Awesome.
And it was a number of months later. There was three guys in particular, all older than me. I was only, like I say, 13 years old at the time. They were triathletes, and the youngest triathlete that I knew on the swim team, he was 19, so the age difference was significant at that time. And my hometown, even though it's a very small town of about 30 odd thousand people, at the time, one of Canada's top triathletes was from Corner Brook, and he was training. He was training with us. He was about 24 or 25 at the time.
Wow.
And another guy, his name was Jamie Merrigan. He was 19 and one of the juniors in the triathlon at the time. I just went up to him with all the gusto I could muster. I wasn't very confident back then, but I just worked up the courage to go up and talk to him. He was a friendly guy, but like in no way intimidating. But I just said to him, "Hey, Jamie, I want to be a triathlete like you." And because at that time I was starting to recognize that the longest event in swimming was 1,500 meters,
Right.
in the pool, and I was like, "Oh, I want to go for hours."
How did you know
So
that? When did you
yeah,
decide that you wanted to swim for hours?
yeah. So I went up to him and said, "I want to be a triathlete," and he just looked at me. I was still not looking like a runner and not looking like much of a swimmer, to be honest, at that time still. And he just said, "Yep, sure, come with us. We train. We do our running training on Wednesday afternoons." And he invited me, to the running, and he was just said a number of encouraging things, and never really forget it. One of the older guys on the team, who would have been, I don't know, 17 or 18 at the time, just as I was getting ready to jump in the water for practice, he went up to Jamie after this conversation. He goes, "Why would you help him out? He's a little fatty, so he's never going to be able to do a triathlon. So, who does that guy think he is?" And basically, it was one of those moments in life that, to some people it wouldn't seem like very much, but I mean, it was basically, who do I think I am? And I said, I don't actually have the answer to that right now, but whoever I am or whoever I'm going to become, I'm going to be a long distance swimmer and I'm going to be a triathlete. That's what I jumped in the pool, swam harder than I ever had before, and went to do my first triathlon in my hometown maybe 3 months later.
Wow.
On my $200 bike from a department store.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's how that journey started. So I do both triathlon and marathon swimming, as you know. The endurance sport journey started with that decision to go on the swim team. So I'd be allowed to participate. And then, I just went to triathlon. And on my third season of triathlon, my swimming coach, she also said, "Hey, you should do marathon swimming too. We've got open water events that are starting.
Wow.
You'd love it. Let's do it." And I thought, "Yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it."
So I feel like you kind of skipped from I'm a swimmer to I want to be a marathon swimmer and a triathlete.
Yeah.
When did you learn that you were really like comfortable in the water for long periods? And when did you start like open water swimming? And what was that
transition my first open water swim was a couple of days before the triathlon in my hometown.
Okay.
And in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, I mean, we have two seasons. We have winter and, like almost winter. And to be fair, we do have a reasonably short, brief summer. But I mean, I've learned that summer is actually since longer since I then moved to Australia and now New Zealand. I actually learned that summer is longer and actually warmer. But the lake that the triathlon is held in is frozen a lot of the year. So my first ever time really trying to train in the open water was just a few days before my first triathlon.
Wow.
And in my first triathlon, I alluded a moment ago, I could never learn to throw a ball straight. Swimming in a straight line, after a little bit of practice, became almost a natural talent, but it did take a little bit of practice.
Mm-hmm.
On that first triathlon I did, that was my first open water race, the 1,500-meter swim in that race. I could not swim in a straight line. So that 1,500 meters is probably a lot closer to 2 kilometers, maybe even a little longer.
Right.
And I didn't know about looking up to sight to see where you're going. I just thought, well, I look at the black line in the pool, I'll just keep my head down and go. In the starting chute, they had they took lane ropes from the pool and they set up a buoy line. It was 25 meters out on, I don't know how wide it was, but enough to fit a few hundred athletes starting at the start line. So I decided in my first triathlon, I'm small, I'm the youngest guy here, I'm 13 years old. I better stay off to the side so that I don't get myself killed. And it was a good strategy. I didn't get kicked in the face, but I didn't know about sighting, so I slammed into that buoy that was into the head. So my introduction to open water swimming wasn't a whole lot better than basketball, but the difference is, with a bit of training, I could actually learn to go straight and, reasonably good. Not elite, but I became reasonably good at it.
Nice. So when did you start swimming longer distances? Triathlon swims aren't so long. So when did you start swimming longer?
I became interested in marathon swimming. Like I said, I did triathlons for the first few years. Like the first few triathlons I did were, kind of a stumbling through, arguably a bit of a disaster, but I really enjoyed myself. It was my third season in triathlon where this is something I describe in my book quite a lot, where, I don't want to make it sound like I evolved into a world champion, because that's not true. I mean, I was never an elite athlete, but I was finding my feet in the sport of triathlon and marathon swimming. My coach had come to me just as I was starting the third triathlon season and said, yeah, you should be a marathon swimmer. And there was this 16-kilometer event in a place called Lac Saint Jean, Quebec, in Canada. And a week before my hometown triathlon, this 16-kilometer swim was held. And I thought, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go swim for 16 kilometers. I've, never swam that far before, but go for it. And the Lac Saint Jean marathon swimming was just this, it was just this amazing thing. I mean, like I'd been outside of Newfoundland before, but never for competing until, that season. And, just that was where I got my first exposure to people swimming longer than, 1,500 meters in the pool. And the 1,500, I knew about Ironman triathlon. I hadn't done an Ironman at that point. I did many later, but in an Ironman, the swim is 4K. Right. And for me, in triathlon, I'm a reasonably good runner, and I was never that great a cyclist. I mean, I was could hold my own, but cycling was my weak leg. And I always kind of had it in the back of my mind. I wish they'd do a triathlon where like the swim would take as long as the bike and the run. Right. So that's why the 16-kilometer swim just immediately appealed to me. And so that was in 1993 that I did that race. So that's when the longest I'd ever swam before outside of swim practice would have been 6 or 7K. And, so I found myself at the start of a 16K, which, big jump.
How did that go?
It actually went really well. I won. Wow. Not the overall event. I won the junior event. I was 17 at the time. My strategy, this was in the days before Google, of course. Didn't have any ways to research what's the best things you should do for a marathon swim. And my Corner Brook, Newfoundland library, you can imagine, wasn't stocked with marathon swimming books. So I just had this strategy of, right, I'll get in the water and I'll go hard, and then I'll go harder and see how long it takes to finish. And that is more or less what happened. If I can't remember my exact time, it would have been, 3 hours, maybe 3:45, if I remember correctly, in that sort of ballpark. It was less than 4 hours. But it was just a case of let's go hard and go harder, hurt like hell, and see how long it takes. And it was somewhere in the range of 3:45. I can't remember the exact time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. What came next in the marathon swimming sphere? after that 16K at 17?
Well, I'll just back up one step there, if that's okay. Because
Absolutely.
an important part of the journey was the triathlon that happened 3 or 4 weeks before that.
Hmm.
It was in a place called Truro, Nova Scotia, which is one province over in Atlantic Canada. Um, I mentioned my dad had a heart attack when he was in his 40s. He survived it, and unfortunately, he kind of descended into alcoholism.
Oh.
So that part of my marathon swim and triathlon journey was very important.
Mm.
Um, Basically, uh, the way I describe my family life prior to being a teenager, it was a bit like volcanoes. Things would boil over and then things would kind of go back to normal for quite a long time.
Hmm.
I always, in retrospect, compare my father to Homer Simpson when I was a little kid. I had the sense that he cared, and he was just content to watch TV and have a beer, and occasionally came out of a shell. But yeah, unfortunately, for a variety of things that happened in his life, and he descended into a downward spiral of alcoholism and drug abuse, that sort of thing.
Mm.
So he got increasingly violent, and 3 days before this triathlon that I was going to in Truro, Nova Scotia, that's when it got as violent as it, up to that point. He attacked me while I was making my dinner. So it was one of those things that, before that, in my mind, abuses and violence in families is what happens to other people.
Hmm.
I guess it's fair to say. Like I say, there were threats of it before that, but it never actually happened. And I guess I was pretty much in a state of shock. My swimming coach at the time, her name was Anna Curzan. I basically, I feel fortunate in a sense that when I was 17 and had 4 years of training under my belt, I was big enough and capable enough to look after myself. So I wasn't hurt. I mean, I fought back and I actually hurt him. But I ran out of the house. My mother was away out of town that weekend. My sister was staying with friends. So my swimming coach looked after me for weeks at a time until my mother came home.
Wow.
And yeah, that was just a few days before this event we were going to in Nova Scotia. And basically, a number of months before that, I'd had another family confrontation that wasn't as bad, but I'd swam 1,500-meter freestyle in the Newfoundland Championships, and I'd done miserably, just because I was just mentally affected by the family chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So I was standing at the water's edge of this Truro triathlon, and I was 17, and in the triathlons that I've been doing up till then, I've been starting to come out of the water reasonably close to the leaders, and but I never actually won the swim. And my pattern in triathlon was drop back some on the bike because I was a relatively weaker cyclist, and occasionally have put in a really good run and make up some time. So in this triathlon in Truro, Nova Scotia, I was standing at the water's edge, and I was just like, kind of, my mind was just all over the place, wondering how it was going to be affected, and I just had this moment probably 30 seconds before the gun went off. And I won't use the exact language that was going on in my head. The exact language is in my little book that I wrote.
Yes.
But I just went, okay, I'm not going to stand a chance against these guys on the bike, but I'm leaving. I'm not letting this man affect me. I'm leaving everyone behind, and I'm going to make these guys hurt like hell and make up a lot of ground to catch me today. And I just had the best swim of my life up until that point. And honestly, like, of all the swimming I've done, we'll get to the Clutha River and crossing Lake Tekapo in New Zealand and all that stuff. But honestly, that 1,500-meter swim in that triathlon is my favorite swim that I've ever done.
Wow.
Because, it was one of those things that life was going off the rails, and things just, triathlon brought me back from the brink, and, the swim part in particular. And on that day, I came out of the water, I was a long way up, and I was expecting my pattern of being passed. And except for the top ranked guy in the field, he passed me finally about 20K into the bike of 40K. And I was expecting guys when I got off the bike, oh, surely they're going to catch me now, but I was just on fire, and I nearly ran down the leader, and I came in second place. So
Wow.
from my point of view, I came from a guy who tripped over his feet in his first triathlon and smashed into the first buoy. And, that was one of my best performances. And I've since won other triathlons, not anymore because I'm now 46. But, that's my favorite performance. So, yeah. But yeah, it was 3 or 4 weeks later. I went to that swim in Lac Saint Jean.
Working the demons out or something, right?
Sorry,
just
I missed
trying
that.
to think. That's okay. I was just thinking about the just how, like swimming and triathlon, like sport can be so therapeutic.
Absolutely.
And you can
Absolutely.
also learning about yourself and your own capabilities can really help you through those really tough family situations. And
yeah, absolutely. And I guess a shift in my, I look at that race as something that shifted my whole adult thinking in my adult life. It was largely born out of, I was becoming more experienced in training, yes. But it would be a mistake to think that being angry at something is a healthy way to deal with, and basically, it's been, you probably heard this. I mean, most endurance athletes that I know have had it suggested to have at least one person that, why are you doing this form of self-flagellation? Why are you making yourself hurt?
Yeah.
And obviously, if you make yourself hurt when you're already hurting, that can go into a downward spiral in a different way. In my case, it didn't. And in my case, it, even with the benefit of retrospective, I believe it was healthy. But I recognize that, if you in doing something that is inherently painful to escape from some other kind of pain, that can go in the bad direction. I don't have the answer to what formula exactly to keep it on a healthy level is, but whatever it was that I did, I like to think worked.
Yeah. I think I guess it's there's a self, it's recognizing and as an individual, what you're capable of, that, and it, to me, that's the value, I guess, of, and I think that's a value of individual sports, whereas team sports, you really learn this team atmosphere. And I think there's value to that too, but there's just something for me in marathon swimming about realizing what I'm capable of, and defying my own belief about what I thought I could do. That is, I don't know, it's transformative for me.
Absolutely. And I 100%, can relate to that. And for me, team is it's not that I don't like teams. I mean, I love people. I mean, I've got a very extroverted side and I've got a very introverted side. I would happily be on a team if I was capable of not stuffing everything up for the team. I would have happily played basketball because I do actually enjoy just running around on the field and all that sort of thing. But, I'm kind of glad that, I'm not at all skilled in, handling a ball or aiming for a target of any kind, because I do love triathlon more, and it does allow you to explore a deep in marathon swimming, a deeper side of yourself. And for me, like I say, I mean, I'm one of the few triathletes that the swim is the strongest leg, and that's always been the case, but it's more so now, because I'm even more into marathon swimming. So I still train mostly as a triathlete, but a lot more emphasis on swimming than the average triathlete. And what I've always loved about the open water in particular is I can get into a meditative flow state. I do yoga as well, and I've tried meditating. The physical part of yoga is great. It helps me keep me injury free, but sitting under a tree or looking at a candle, my mind will just go but for whatever reason, swinging my arms to the water, particularly open water, my mind can quiet. That's where I get my meditative state happening, even if I'm going hard and hurting. So that's one of the reasons I think I'm capable of swimming for a lot longer and doing these stage swims that I now do. It's in my flow state. I don't get bored. A lot of people have asked me, and I'm sure you've gotten this question as well, is isn't that boring? Going for swimming for 3, 4, 5, 6, more than that, 10 hours, isn't
Yeah.
that like, this is the most boring thing ever? And objectively, I guess you sort of have to agree. You're just going for hours and hours and hours, just swinging your arms, and you can't talk to people. And that's, one of the things I love about it is, like I mentioned, I have an extroverted side, but marathon swimming, even more so than running and cycling, allows you to really explore being an introvert. Because even if you're with other people, you can't talk to them unless you stop.
Right.
And there's some magic in that. I love it.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
always perplexed by the person who wants to do marathon swimming but they get bored like in a pool. I don't know, there's it's fascinating talking to so many marathon swimmers, because some people are like, oh well, you like purposely, like you make yourself bored swimming back and forth in a pool like in order to kind of go to the open water. And like, I mean, because for me, like being in the open water is hardly boring.
No,
There's just so much you get to see things, whatever. It's just hugely adventurous. But yeah, that there's definitely a mind shift that has to happen. Like if you think boredom's even an option, it's probably not the sport for you.
No, I mean, the people who love swimming, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think we made this joke on your Marathon Swimming Collective Facebook page a number of months ago. I don't remember if it was you or someone else who posed the question. What do you say to potential marathon swimmers who say they get bored? And I recall making a joke. Well, there's always the 100-meter freestyle.
Exactly.
And there's nothing. And like, I don't want to knock that. I don't want to make it sound like I'm making that a derogatory statement. 100-meter freestyle is great. It's just, for me, it's over too fast. Like,
exactly.
like, and some people want.
I can't even warm up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a different mindset. It's not necessarily a better mindset, but I mean, the ability to not get bored doing the same thing over and over, the same physical thing. I mean, I personally don't really get bored in the pool either. I'm quite happy to go, 7 to 10K swim practice during the week or on the weekend when, in the cold months when, either the water is frozen or a bit too cold to be going that long. But I mean, put me in the open water, and I mean, especially on a beautiful day when you got only not, I don't know what it's like. I mean, I imagine never been to Oregon where you are, but lots of beautiful mountains and everything around the lakes and and all that. I mean, here in New Zealand, I just feel like a spoiled little child with all the options we have with these glacial lakes and the beautiful coastline, which is right next to me here in Christchurch, and the rivers that we'll get into river swimming soon enough, I'm sure. I don't know how I could not get bored in the open water, especially when you got the dolphins showing up and the fish going underneath you and all that. I mean, it's just unreal. I love it.
Yeah, I'm about to book a trip to New Zealand. Sign me up. That sounds amazing.
Well, as soon as world travel is normal again,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been ironic. I won't talk about COVID for any length of time, but I mean, this whole time, I mean, New Zealand's kind of been the envy of the world, and now, not here in Christchurch on South Island, but Auckland, unfortunately, is not doing so well at the moment. But hopefully, fingers crossed by, I'll say Christmas, but no sense in speculating because I gave up speculating on what's going to happen about 18 months ago. So
Good choice. So let's see. I know you've probably there was probably a lot between the foundational 1500-meter triathlon and the following 16K, but how did that, like, where is it taken you? Maybe just give us the highlights.
Well, I mean, my book is called Downriver Nomad.
Yes.
And the reason it's called that is because, well, it ends with the Clutha River swim, which we'll get to shortly. But it's fair to say I've been a nomadic person. Modern nomad, I guess. But I've lived in 5 countries, obviously Canada, where I'm from. I did my education in England. So I lived there for 4 years doing marathon swimming and triathlon events and some events through Europe and things like that. Then I moved to Australia immediately after graduating college. And, I didn't really have a plan other than I'll go work there for a while. The reason being is because when I was 5 years old, I decided I wanted to live in Australia.
Good reason.
The very short version of that story is basically my mother. I don't know if she recognized my love of maps or if she had this gigantic map and I just fell in love with it. I don't really know which one happened first, But she used to play this game called the map. She just called it the map game with us. She'd give me and my sister 2 letters. And she'd say, right, find a country that begins with that first letter, find a city within that country that begins with the second one. So even though I'm from a pretty small town, I started to gain a knowledge of where places were, and for whatever reason developed this fascination with Australia. And I said, right, I'm going to go ride my BMX bike around Australia when I said this when I was 5. I'm going to ride my BMX bike, going looking for koalas and kangaroos. And it was right on all accounts, except it turned out to be a triathlon bike, not a BMX.
Nice.
But so I moved to Australia, and, it continued doing triathlons and marathon swimming there. Like, I did this amazing marathon swim in this section of South Australia that's called the Coorong. It's where the Murray River meets the ocean, but the unique geography there is that the Coorong Peninsula separates the ocean, and where the Murray River dumps into it, it's a gradual transition of fresh water to salt water. So my first part of this particular 20K marathon swim that I did in the Coorong, which was a self-organized, not a race, you're starting off in fresh water, and this gradual, there's the salt, and you can taste a little bit of it and a little bit more, and okay, I'm in the salt water. And pelicans are going around, and seals, and just an incredible environment. And that was one of the highlights of marathon swimming in Australia.
Very cool.
And then I eventually, my wife and I did a year in Singapore, which was different because I'm not really a city guy. But then we eventually moved to New Zealand not quite 4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll stick?
New Zealand, I can't imagine a reason why I'd leave. I mean, I'm old enough now to know that I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to bother trying to predict. I'm at the stage now where I don't think I want to be nomadic in terms of living. I think because I've just realized how expensive it is moving countries all the time. And what I love about New Zealand is that it's very small in comparison, to Canada and the US and Australia. But in this compact country, there's just there's just so many spoiled for choice adventure options that are just so easy to get to. The rivers, the lakes, the oceans, and I still run around in the mountains, both on foot and on mountain bike, and cycle touring. The adventure options here, even though it's not a big place, I don't think I'll live long enough to do them all.
Right.
Yeah, because every time I go to a place that I've never been or have been before, I learn about, there's another trail over there, or I didn't know about that river that is deep enough for swimming, or never thought of swimming across that lake because it never came to my mind. And so there's just so much stuff to do. It's just for a marathon swimming adventure triathlete, because most of my triathlon related stuff, the cycling and the running, isn't done on the race course now. It's done out in the back country, and I'd make up a lot of my own, what I call self-made adventure triathlons, where I'll pick a lake or I'll pick a river. The next day I'll go ride the mountain bike, and the next day I'll go on a mountain track and run. So the options are limitless, and obviously the last 18 months or whatever it's been, travel options have not been there. But other than being in New Zealand, for me anyway. And so I'm not going to rule out ever moving again, because I don't like to predict what might happen to 5, 10, 15 years from now, but I'm an extremely content man in New Zealand.
Nice. Tell us about transitioning to kind of self-made events, and like what kind of knowledge and experience and things that you've had to pick up, or are you just learning as you go, or tell us about that.
Well, it's definitely a learning as I go. I've been a triathlete since I was 13. I'm now 46, and I did that year in Singapore where I did the Singapore triathlon, both sprint distance and Olympic distance, and I did several organized marathon swims there. And obviously Singapore being that small place, but very populated, I just suffered what I call nature deficiency syndrome. It was an interesting experience, but I won't do it again. So when I got to New Zealand, the first 2 triathlons I did here, you know, just the sprint distance, 750 meter swim, 20K bike, 5K run. They were in suburbia, and it just, I was like, I'm in one of the most beautiful countries on the planet. What am I running around suburbia for? I mean, I've done plenty of mountain expeditions and desert and all that stuff before, but that was my first experience. Like, within a few months of being in New Zealand, I was running in suburbia as hard as I could. And I was like, I just wasn't lit up by competition. I realized that I wanted to, if I'm going to be with other people, I want it to be like a small group. If we're out in the ocean, we can stop, we can chat. We can, if a dolphin swims by, I want to say good day to them. And the same sort of thing out on the mountains. Like if I'm up on the mountains, either on the road and the bike or the backcountry mountain bike or on running, if there's a really beautiful view, I don't want to feel the pressure of racing. I just wanted to stop and soak it up, and either solo or in the camaraderie of a small group. Not that I'm not racing anymore. Like I used to do 8 to 10 triathlons a year plus 5 or 7 marathon swims a year competition. And I just found I really like pushing the limits of endurance still. But nature became more important to me than trying to be as fast as I could. That's not to say I don't swim as fast as I can a lot. But if I see something that's really nice to look at, I'm not feeling like, oh, I can't stop because I'm not allowed. That became more important. And then I had a number of experiences. It actually started, the main catalyst was actually a run when I was still living in Australia. There's a trail in the Northern Territory, not that far from Alice Springs, called the Larapinta Trail. And it was this 4-day run out in like the desert. And it was literally one of those places on Earth where you could go to Mars, but you could also go to the Larapinta Trail, and it probably wouldn't be a whole lot different. It's it's as close to Mars as you can get without having to go rescue Matt Damon in that movie he was in. And so this was this 4-day run. I mean, it was a race, but I wasn't one of the top contenders. I mean, I was, for my running, I seem to be one of those people that no one runs the same speed as me. Plenty of people are faster, plenty of people are slower, but there's not that many people I've ever run with in 30 years that are actually the same speed runner as me. Yeah, I did this 4-day run, and because I was alone or only with a couple of people here and there at a time for 4 days out in literally nowhere, that was kind of a transformative moment thing for me. And I thought, then I heard about, guys like Martin Strel, the guy who swam the Amazon River. And, and I thought, okay, I really enjoyed running for 4 days. That really beat me up. I've been cycle touring for weeks at a time. I'm not sure I want to swim for, I think it was 66 days Martin took to swim the Amazon. And I'm not 100% convinced I want to swim with piranhas and anaconda snakes. I think you may be familiar with his story. I don't know. And I didn't really want to swim through pollution.
Right.
I like clean water, and New Zealand fortunately has lots of that. So yeah, I mean, I just became intrigued by organizing either by myself or, if there's an event that takes 4 or 5 days that's within my budget, or 6 days or a week or so, I'm, quite happy to, have this, staged events is what I really like, and going for anywhere between 4 to 10 hours in the day and getting up and repeat, whether that's back-to-back swimming or a swim one day, a run one day, a bike one day. That's the kind of thing that I've, gotten really into. And like one of the main events that I'm planning this coming summer is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the place called Milford Sound Fjord in New Zealand.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of the iconic fjords in New Zealand, and it's stunning place. It's not important that no one's ever swam it, but no one has ever swam it, and it's approximately crudely measured on Google Map to be about 20K. So one of the things that I'm going to do this summer is I'm going to swim the length of Milford Sound with some boat support. And the next day, 3 or 4 of my running friends are going to run the Milford Track, which is 50 something kilometers anyway. So that's like a multi-sport marathon swim. But I asked the guys, "Hey, do you want to swim the fjord first?" They're like, "No, we'll just stick to the run. You can swim." So,
Talk to me about pioneering is another thing that fascinates me about marathon swimming, and you're doing it like on all fronts with the bike and the run and the swim. And you'd mentioned it's not important that no one's done it, but no one's done it. So like how much is that
yeah.
that is a draw for you to pioneer new things?
Well, look, I mean, just on that note, I mean, I'll get right into the Clutha, because that's kind of arguably the thing that no one else had done. And it's not, I don't want to, the Clutha River in New Zealand, in just, quickly, it was 256 kilometers long. And it goes from a little town that's just this idyllic mountain lake town called Wanaka, pretty much in the center of South Island. And it goes kind of a southeast direction and drains into the Pacific. And it's the second longest river in New Zealand, and it's the longest on South Island. But it's by far the most powerful river, in terms of water volume, current strength, all that stuff. The longer river on North Island is quite. Forgive me, I can't remember if it's called the Wanganui. I think it's called the Wanganui River. It's probably about 50K longer, but there's almost no rapids. It's very slow. And so I haven't actually been there yet. That might go on the to-do list. But the Clutha, basically, it came to my attention. I'd done this river swimming event that was organized in my first marathon swimming season here in New Zealand. There's a little town called Tiano in the southwest corner of South Island, and Lake Tiano has this river called the Waiau River, where they actually did in the first Lord of the Rings film. I don't recall the name of the river that's in Lord of the Rings, but there's some river scenes that were shot there. And by this stage, I mean, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money doing, these far-flung adventures, because I mean, I realized that the financial side, I do okay, but I don't earn a stack of money. I'm a chiropractor, and I see enough people to live and have adventures, but I have no desire to bankrupt myself doing this, because I've been in debt before and don't want that again.
Right.
And so my wife had kind of gently nudged me, like, rather than trying to set these big goals, like, do the Ocean 7, like, just purely objectively. I mean, if someone wrote me a blank check and say, yeah, go to the Ocean 7. Yeah, absolutely. Let's start tomorrow, but as I'm sure you probably know, it's no cheap endeavor. So, so my wife said to me, she said, she actually said to me when we were visiting Lake Tekapo in winter, which is not when you would swim Lake Tekapo.
Right.
It's a 26-kilometer lake that I did swim in February past. She said, if you were to swim across Lake Tekapo, look at that. She said, all it would cost you is a hotel room and buy your kayak or a pizza. Would you have a worse time swimming than if you spent $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 to go do a swim? And she was like, huh, why didn't you say that to me years ago? That's a great idea, And, so my wife, who is very active, we go cycling and camping together. She's never been competitive, but she's very active. That was kind of one of those nudges in that direction. And then anyway, we went down to this, I went down and did this swim in Tiana, where we swam approximately 3 kilometers across the lake. The 22-kilometer Waiau River then drains into Lake Manapuri. That was my first real experience in river swimming. And I just had the most fun. Like, I've always had fun marathon swimming, but something about river swimming just lit me up. I mean, it was just this just completely different set of skills that I can't explain it. There's no practical value to it, other than if I was in a boat and fell in the river, I could survive, but I have, don't want to sound like I'm shooting my mouth off, but I'm very good at river swimming,
Yeah.
and it just seemed to be a natural talent, one of the few that I have. And so
I always worry about the rocks when I'm swimming in rivers. They sneak up on you really fast.
that's true. And and that's one of the reasons why not every river is going to be swimmable.
Right.
Like there's a river, I'll try to stay on, focused on one river at a time, but just on that note, there's a river called the Buller River in New Zealand, which I've also swam the lower 42 kilometers of. You can't, you shouldn't swim the upper Buller because there's too many rocks. I mean, like it'd be kayakers do it. But I just ruled out swimming the upper Buller. But no one had ever swam the lower Buller. No one ever thought that would be a good idea. And, after I swam this river swim event that, like I say, went across Lake Tiano, down the Waiau, which is the Lord of the Rings River, and then across what's called Lake Manapuri, just otherworldly, stunning, surrounded by mountains, just absolutely beautiful place. That event, that was an organized swim, but only 9 people did it. It was organized by a little group of people called the Fear Society, which was the Fjordland Endurance and Adventure Racing Society. So Fear Society.
I love it.
That ignited my river swimming thing. So I just, after, I don't know, a few weeks after that event, I emailed the race director and said, hey, I've only been in New Zealand a relatively short time. I've seen other rivers, but they're all too shallow. Which other rivers would be good to swim? And he goes, well, there's the Clutha. But you'd probably only be able to do it in a one-day thing, like swim the upper Clutha, because it's 256 kilometers long. And I thought, and I asked them, like in an exchange email, I said, like, is it deep the whole way or is it just deep at the start? And he goes, no, it's deep the whole way, but you could never do it in a day because it's 256 kilometers long. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to do it in a day. I'll do it in lots of days. And so basically, I came up with this idea, but I'd never actually been there at that point. And I looked at YouTube videos, and then I just emailed the harbor master in Otago, responsible for all the marine safety. And I said, hey, I got this idea. I'm a marathon swimmer. I want to swim the Clutha. And he goes, what do you think? And the email I got back was, I would have loved to have seen his face when he read this email. He emailed me back and he said, I don't know who you are, but only an idiot would try to swim the Clutha. It'd be impossible. I looked back at the YouTube videos. I said, this looks swimmable. So I thought, I'm an idiot. I'll try this. So I basically, I went down. This was in the winter, so you couldn't swim the Clutha in the winter; it'd be too cold. But I went down to Wanaka, and I got the kayaking tour company to take me out on the river. And I got, oh yeah, this is doable. You'd probably had to be an idiot to do it, but I'm an idiot. I'll go for it. And I didn't see the full length of the river, only the upper section. So basically, over the next 10 or 11 months, I think it was, I just said, yep, I'll self-organize this adventure. I'll estimate how far I'll get each day, but not really knowing, like if it was still water, I can pretty much estimate how far I could get in a day. But because the Clutha has a couple of dams on it, and there's strong sections, there's weaker sections, and there's sections where you got to swim across what's called Lake Dunstan as well, which is a 14-kilometer lake. So I'm going to call it an absolute fluke that where I chose to stay each night turned out to be exactly where we got. That's not by wonderful planning on I did do a lot of planning, but it's not because I'm just a genius or anything like that. It was a total fluke that's how the current strength worked out each day. But yeah, the Clutha, I swam that in February 2020, incidentally, just a month before the world went mad.
Oh, geez.
Like I'd heard the word COVID before, but I didn't really, take any notice of it.
Yeah.
I just thought it was going to be, like another swine flu, I guess, like not good, but didn't really affect life. I didn't think. So, but anyway, how
many hours a day did you end up swimming, roughly?
Well, it varied a little bit. The shortest day was 7 hours and change, and the longest day was just over 9 hours.
Wow.
So I estimated it would take me 6 days. I thought it might take me 5, so I allowed for 6, and I thought maybe 7 or 8 just in case there's bad weather, that sort of thing. It was one of those wonderful weeks where the New Zealand weather just cooperated. Didn't have any weather delays, and but 3 weeks before, this is the other thing about river swimming, as you know, in every marathon swim outside, you got to be obviously mindful of the weather and the water conditions, but river swimming, you got to also factor in, well, was there a flood recently, or was there a drought where the river's not deep enough? So 3 weeks out from the Clutha swim, there was actually a severe storm that flooded the Clutha. And, cubics, which is cubic meters of water per second, for those who don't know, that's how they measure water flow. I mean, the Clutha averages approximately 600 cubics as its water flow, and it actually got up to 3,200 cubics
Oh
in the storm. So there's no, I mean, if that had happened during my swim, no chance would I have jumped in the water. It would have been suicide. But it finally settled down just 3 days before the scheduled start, and it actually was wonderful because it cleared out a lot of debris. It made it actually safer. I just think that the universe has smiled on me on that week because all the conditions lined up, the weather, the flood went down, there was no debris. It was I was very, very fortunate, because one of the things that I talk about, one of the things I reflect on, and when I started writing about it, was that I looked back on quite a number of things in my life that where things went wrong, and you think, okay, what could I have done differently? And was I being an idiot there, or was that just really bad luck? It's like, you don't really control anything. You have influence over what happens, but at the end of the day, you don't actually control it. And I think there's an expression that a lot of people use, only try to control what you can control. And I could be wrong, but personally, I think that's a misleading thing, because I don't think you can control anything. You can influence a lot of things, but at the end of the day, the actual outcome that happens isn't 100% within your control. So river swimming makes that very apparent to me. I think in retrospect, when looking back on my dad's alcoholism and a lot of the other things that have happened, I was trying to control a lot of my life. I had made a firm decision to never become an alcoholic. When I was a teenager and up until I was 30, I refused to have a drop of alcohol. Like, I now enjoy a glass of red wine each week. Like, I've loosened up on that. But for me, it was trying to control everything. I was like, right, I saw what it did to my father, and I thought, I am never doing that. So I think I was trying to take control of my life by making decisions like that. And, a lot of things went arguably really well, but I mean, like everyone else, there's been times where things have gone off the rails, and you look back and you think, oh, geez, how did that happen? I thought I was doing all the right things. And, even with arguably a good amount of self-discipline and doing a lot of things that are arguably healthy, things don't always go so well. So for me, river swimming makes that very apparent. And, understanding there's a skill set, you can prepare. But at the end of the day, it wasn't me that decided I can swim the Clutha now. I look at it, not in a heebie-jeebie sort of way or hippie way, but like, the Clutha allowed me to swim in it. And I have the skill set from years of training to be able to do it, thanks to being allowed.
No, I think
I probably didn't say that as well as it could be articulated, but I think you get the idea.
I've heard other people talk about that, like that. Well, especially with the English channels, like, she'll let you pass or she won't.
I've read many accounts. I haven't swam the English Channel myself, but I've read many accounts, and the Cook Strait is the same here in New Zealand. I haven't done that yet, but it will be on the list eventually. In the Fovo Strait, which is on the south between Stewart Island and South Island, that's on my to-do list as well. But I mean, marathon swimming is one of those things where, like, the conditions have to line up. And if the conditions just aren't going to go well, doesn't matter how tough you are, you know, you ain't going to get around it. And that's one of the things I've loved about transitioning from being a competitive athlete to what I just refer to as an athlete adventurer. I can't remember where I first heard that expression. I probably read it somewhere. I don't recall who said it, but you know, competitive athletes, generally speaking, are training in a largely sealed environment. You know, that's not true for 100% of sports, obviously, but you know, there's, I won't say controllable conditions, but you know, the conditions are set up that you've got a better chance of succeeding. But an athlete adventurer, you know, I mean, like you are, you know, it is in the old expression, you know, man, or I'll say human versus nature. I mean, nature is going to win if nature wants to.
Yep.
So that's one of the things I find intriguing about being more of an adventurer triathlete and adventure, you know, like I say, with the focus of marathon swimming, as opposed to, you know, saying, here's the distance, let's go as fast as possible.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think just two more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
I think you've kind of touched on this, but maybe just in a little package. What have you learned about yourself through marathon swimming?
Well, through marathon swimming and, you know, triathlon, I like to think, you know, I've learned, you know, there isn't any, like I say, no control. Like I say, when I had it in my head that I wanted to control having a life of adventure full of love and laughter and meeting funny and interesting characters. That's what I wanted to control. And I've certainly met a lot of funny and interesting characters along the way, and you know, had a lot of adventures. But I just think you find, you know, there's a resilience that you can build up. I don't think you can build resilience without challenging yourself. And you know, I've heard it said by you know, people like Dean Karnazes, who's that ultra marathon runner. You know, he has this expression, you know, people in modern life are so comfortable they're miserable. And I think that's one of the reasons why things like marathon swimming and the increasingly popular ultra marathons and Ironman triathlons, and like these days, I mean, there's these crazy events in almost every kind of endurance sport there is, where it's just getting a bit more outside the box, and you know, that's really appealing. And I think so many people, myself included, that are doing things like this, you know, it's a primal thing. You know, you know, we don't have to go out and hunt for our food. We can just go pick it up.
Yeah.
And you know, if we're too cold, we turn up the heat. If we're too hot, we can turn on the aircon. You know, we can. So there's a balance. Like I think, obviously, like anything, it could be taken too far. But I mean, challenging yourself is. I don't want to make it sound like everyone has to be an endurance athlete, but like I don't want to make it sound like that at all. But I think challenging yourself in one way or another, whether you want to challenge yourself in the water, on the trail, challenge yourself with a musical instrument, or challenge yourself by painting a beautiful picture, or whatever floats your boat. I think following your heart and doing what you love is very important. And that doesn't necessarily mean your absolute passion in life has to be what you do for work. I'm fortunate that I love my work, but you know, some people say you have to make your passion your vocation, and in many cases that is obviously good and it works and all that sort of thing. But you know, well, not everyone's going to be able to. If everyone loved marathon swimming, you can't have everyone being a marathon swimmer. You know,
right.
Other things have to happen in life.
Yeah.
So basically, I've learned to follow my heart. And, you know, when I was 17, a few days after my dad attacked me, following my heart led me to a triathlon. And following a triathlon led me to marathon swimming and also this traveling life that I've had. And following my heart led me to the Clutha River. And also, just at the risk of sounding like I'm plugging it.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask.
I was a very creative little kid. I was into art. And when I wasn't running around getting dirtier in the water, I was into art, and I was always writing short stories when I was a little kid. And somewhere through adulthood, I don't recall exactly when, lost touch with my creative side. And then basically a month after the Clutha, like I'm an avid reader. You probably are as well. Like I've read Lynn Cox's stuff. I read Dean Karnazes. I read Ross Edgley. You know, those sorts of people are, you know, a lot of the people I like reading about. And I always had it in my head, like, I want to write a book like that. And I thought one of the reasons I didn't was just excuse of time, and the other one was like, who's going to read about me? Why would anyone do that? That's, that seemed a bit egomaniac to me, because I haven't won an Olympic gold medal, and I wasn't the first to climb Everest or anything like that. So basically, when I finished swimming the Clutha, it took 4.5 days to reach the Pacific, and I was just on this absolute high. And I thought 2-3 hours later, I thought, there's the logical conclusion to that book I've always wanted to write. And then, when I recovered and I went back to work, I said, right, I started jotting down notes. And then, a month later, I was like, oh, we're in lockdown, and
lockdown project.
Yeah. And on the second day of lockdown in New Zealand for 7 weeks, we had what could be said was one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. And up until recently, it worked. But I just thought on the second day of lockdown, I was like, right, don't want to sit around watching Netflix for however long this is going to last. I want to write this. And that's what I started doing. And it took longer than the 7-week lockdown that we had in New Zealand. It took me the best part of the pandemic, because we recently, Auckland is still in lockdown. Christchurch and, the whole of New Zealand had a 3-week lockdown, I think it was. And I started writing on the second day of the first lockdown, and I got it up on the online platforms for pre-order on the second last day of the second lockdown.
Wow.
So it took a while. It was, for me, it was like honestly a different kind of marathon swim, if you will, because, I'd never done anything like it. And I think there's a certain number of people that think that writing a book is kind of this romantic, idyllic lifestyle. It's hard work. The flow stage where I was just free writing, I got it down to about 82 or 83,000 words, which is standard length for, most books. I'd originally written close to 200,000, which I realized that's not what you do when you write a book. Basically, I realized somewhere through, I don't need to describe every single marathon swim and every single triathlon I ever did to tell a story. But again, that was valuable for me. Mm-hmm. And so my little book, Downriver Nomad,
can we find it?
The culmination of it is the Clutha River. But I described that my first triathlon, which was a disaster. And there's adventure-based triathlon, and I went to the World Championships in triathlon in 1998. And there's also some comedic mishaps, like I had there was this absolute I won't describe it to spoil any readers, but there was this absolute fiasco in the Montreal airport after the 1994 triathlon Canadian National Championships, and I was 19 at the time, and that was my first real experience traveling on my own, and it was just absolute disaster. I think I'll be a contender for the world's worst way to get home after an Ironman triathlon. That was in Britain. When in a trek in Mongolia, I somehow inadvertently offended the gods. That was a big, I'm in trouble here. And I lost a fight to a turtle in a marathon swim.
Oh, no. Wow.
Yeah, I'm not going to explain that any longer, but any more detail. But there's man versus nature, and in that one, man lost. So
where how can we find your book?
It's on all the online platforms. So you can use Amazon. Personally, like if you don't want to use Amazon, in America, there's Barnes and Noble. I'm not 100% sure of all the other American online platforms other than those, but there's Booktopia and Book Depository. There's Fish Pond in Australia and New Zealand. There's a few other ones in Canada, but basically on most of the major online book platforms, you can find it. It's called Downriver Nomad, and it was released on Monday, just this week. So October, yesterday for you, 2 days ago for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like, and anyone who wants to read this crazy little story, I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
Well,
I'll be sure and include a link.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And great to finally meet you, not on a Facebook comment.
Right.
And
Right. I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Do you want to take Marathon Swim Stories with you? Subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. Want to connect with like-minded limit pushers? Join us for Marathon Swim Stories live on Tuesdays at 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, 13:30 GMT. Thanks for watching.